following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana Kersner, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for practical advice for everyday problems using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. This episode, we're continuing our chat with my It's Not Therapy community facilitators. We call our communities Bubbles, and they are the Bubbleheads. Jake, Moi, Aquila, and Merryjest are here again, and we're continuing to talk about how we deal with beating ourselves up. Now, if you like what you hear this show, we're going to be doing an online Super Bubble workshop at the end of April 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. April 29th, 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. It's more on not beating yourself up, and it's only $10. Plus, the first 50 tickets are 2 for 1, so you can bring a friend for free. NotTherapyShow.com has the link to the ticketing site. You can sign up for the mailing list while you're there so you can hear more from me or the Bubbleheads. And if you happen to be listening to this after the date is passed, sign up for the mailing list, NotTherapyShow.com. You'll never miss another invite for something like this. So last week, we ran out of time right when Aquila was having a really poignant moment, dropping truths about how sometimes, despite our best efforts, we still beat ourselves up. We still feel like garbage. Then what? And I know for me, I have to actually set limits in my own head of, okay, you're going to feel bad about this. You're going to chew on this for X amount of time. And then you're going to go do something else, because I've found myself being there, but not there way, way too much. And Jake, I'm curious about what you think, because I know you're a very connected person. You maybe I'm wrong, but you really seem to love people in a way that I value, because I'm so grumpy and you're so not. So what did you want to say?
I love people as the individual. As a collective, people are crap. But that's because I work with the general public, so I can't not hold that. I'm sorry, anyone who's out there who's ever worked in customer service, people as a collective.
Yep.
You don't remember the 99 nice ones. You remember the one asshole.
Yep.
So that just happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But generally, when it comes to individuals, and it's kind of actually going off of what Aquila said, but in a reverse, I've lost people I was so close to who I would have trusted with anything, and they betrayed me in manners that I wouldn't have said it would be so dramatic, but for me, it was a betrayal. It was choosing someone who had actively hurt me on purpose and then just expecting me to get over it. And I find that because of the things that, as I said, I was a carer for my mom. I am LGBT, I am gay, I am also autistic. And when people poke at those, I am sensitive at them. It's just a natural characteristic of mine. When people make fun that I don't connect straight away, even though I've told them straight up, listen, I am autistic. If I miss something here, can you just tell me? I don't mind. Just rather know, instead of holding a grudge against me for weeks on end because I didn't understand something or said something wrong. And in this situation, they did exactly that. I told them I was autistic. They still expected me to understand everything they said, being the most sarcastic person I've ever met in my life. And I was betrayed in that, and I lost a confidant that I honestly would have, like Aquila has with her partner. It was an ex of mine. And then the weirdest thing happened, which was people that I barely talked to, who could barely consider an acquaintance, just came up to me and went, "That was shit. Are you all right? Do you want McNuggets?" Because at the time, that's where we hung out. There was a McDonald's in my time, and that was we're going to go feed the ducks McNuggets, which I find incredibly How can I
You're
say?
feeding poultry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's disturbing to me.
Yeah.
That's high praise from Moi, though. You disturb Moi. You win the recording.
Yeah, that's up there. That's up there in that potato chip commercial. But you're a potato.
The California raisins singing so people eat them.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was the weirdest situation because I barely knew their names. I'm still horrible with names, by the way. So Moi, because Moi wanted me to call him by his full name, and he just loves the way I say it, and I don't know if that's whether or not he likes it.
It's fine.
Right.
Yeah, some people. So my full name is Moises. And some people with their accent, it sounds like really amusing because it gives it character.
Jake, how do you handle the urge? Because I mean, you get, like you were talking about, you get beat up on for a living.
Yeah.
In a lot of the things you do. How do you not take that home? How do you not continue that?
I think because of the job that I work with very vulnerable people on a daily basis. And because I can empathize, and I do find myself to be a very empathetic person, just the fact of I have been in the midst of poverty where I have sold consoles just so that we had food to eat that week. I've been there. Like, I'm pretty sure some people will never understand that, and other people's know it to a T of what that sort of poverty is like. But that from there, I understand the frustration that some people deal with. And I go, it's not me they're angry at, it's their circumstance. Sometimes it's not, at which point I've hung up the phone on people and been like, oh, and I'm done.
Right.
But it's also, that comes from the self-confidence that I've built through yourself and through growing older. Earlier in my lifetime, when I wasn't playing video games, I usually played RPGs, or specifically JRPGs. I won't even lie about that. So everything was won by the power of friendship and big boobs and really pointy hair. And it was so silly that I just took my mind away from the absolute shit that I was dealing with at the time. So it was an escapism, but you didn't think about all the crap that you had just dealt with that day. You're currently focusing, right, I need to level her up because she's just joined and she's half the level of the rest of my team. I want to stab you, Kai, but let's get you up here. And that's the only frustration I have in that day, which if anyone's ever played an RPG, you know that pain. I'm just going to say that there's nothing more painful than being really high level and then you get a new character added to your party.
Yeah, they take that out of Western RPGs because it's too frustrating.
I'm sorry. It is.
I'm saving Merryjest for last here because he taught me a lot about not beating myself up. But Moi, you want to add something before we jump there?
Because you, Aquila, you mentioned something really interesting that I really connected to. Is like, sometimes it never ends. Like, I don't want people to listen to this and think there's like an ultimate solution, or like after this they're gonna have it's, again, we're not giving you all the answers, we're just inspiring you to go into a journey. Sometimes you have to accept that. Sometimes you have to accept that it never ends. You can just make more peace with it, and simultaneously, maybe, hopefully you beat yourself up less because you're becoming a full person, that you know what you need and what things help you.
I'm going to throw this over to Merryjest in a minute because he's the extrovert. For me, I work very hard to minimize assumptions in communication and with myself, because that's something I learned in trauma therapy, minimizing the places where communication can break down, minimizing the potential for catastrophic thinking, which is what I believe beating yourself up is a form of, right?
Yeah.
And that connects to only controlling what you can control. Say top 10 phrase, and it's not therapy. Healthy goals are based on things you can control. And I mean, Merryjest was one of the people that taught me about that, because he is a consummate performer. And when you sing, especially at the level he does, sometimes it just don't happen. Anything with the body, sometimes it just ain't happening. And when you're a dancer, for whatever reason, you're expected to stick it every time. And that's horrific when people are going through puberty, because your body changes, you lose your center of balance, your center of gravity changes, you lose your turns, you lose your jumps, you lose everything around the age of 15. And you get, what is wrong with you? Instead of, well, your body's changing. Yeah, your center of gravity is not what it once was. And
understood.
Yeah, and I used to joke that I'm out over my skis if I bend over even an inch, right? I just sort of it's counterbalanced in the back, but I will topple over. There's a lot going on there. But Merryjest was one of the people who talked about the fact that sometimes it just doesn't come out. And he told stories about his teacher about, she was singing, this opera at this big stage and she hit the high note and nothing happened and then she died. And it was so different from my experiences that it gave me permission to not get it every time, in the same way that Steve Martin, his biography, Born Standing Up. I love this book. I recommend it to anybody, because he taught about how, he can't play an instrument, but he can play an instrument funny. And he can't sing, but he can sing funny. And if you look at how Steve Martin plays the accordion and the banjo, he's very, very good at it. He's just, to me, that was his code for not comparing yourself to other people. But I'm speaking for Merryjest right now, and he can speak for himself. So, never mind. We are going to go to a break before we get to Merryjest. This is a big lead up on this one. Merryjest, Professor John. Anyway, we will be back with the Bubbleheads on this roundtable conversation, about not beating yourself up. NotTherapyShow.com if you want to sign up for our workshop on not beating yourself up, or any of our other workshops offered with the Bubbleheads in our It's Not Therapy community. NotTherapyShow.com. We'll be back with Merryjest after the break. Stay tuned. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist, and I am still here with the Bubbleheads, my facilitators on the It's Not Therapy community. We're continuing our roundtable discussion on not beating yourself up, what to do when you do beat yourself up, practical advice for that everyday problem of being too tough on yourself. Now, before the break, I kept trying to get to Merryjest, but there was so much preamble and so much discussion that we had to pause and come back. Merryjest is a dear friend of mine, and he's taught me a lot about not beating myself up less, because he's a professional opera singer. Opera is so nasty and mean and political and subjective. How do you avoid beating yourself up?
Well, I did for a long time just beat myself up, mostly because one of the things that was the hardest for me was the notion that I wasn't in control.
Yeah.
See, because let's say that you're a programmer. Because that can be a black art too. I mean, you squash a bug and 10 more come up. But if you're in a very technical field where you do have, you do this, you get result B, unless there's a variable C, opera and things of that sort that rely on things about the body that we can't control, because we can't flex our vocal cords. Everything a singer does is essentially manipulating voluntary muscles to influence involuntary muscles, which already gives you a kind of a bit of a level of psychological because
you notice he did that with a vibrato. I'll just point it out to everybody there. Okay.
And so, I kept thinking, if I know more about technique, then, I will be in full control. And the first thing that Martial broke my mind with was, you've got to stop trying to control things so much. And I went, what? And she said, if you're going to be a tenor, if you're going to be a good tenor, you have to be comfortable being absolutely vulnerable. Because if you're going to go for, say, a high C, if you try to control that, and you're gonna crack. Well, maybe not you, because my voice is weird. My voice doesn't crack unless I'm sick and my vocal cords are swollen. Instead, I will just straight tone or have very little vibrato if I try to control it. I'm not like other singers, which was part of the problem for a lot of my teachers. But she says, but you have to just surrender to it, and you can have as much preparation as you want. There is always a chance that it'll go wrong because of some unknown variable, because biology is messy. But you can satisfy yourself in knowing that that you're open, you're vulnerable, and if it comes out, it's gonna be glorious. And if it doesn't, she started telling me stories, not about Alfredo Kraus, because the man was an alien from Mars and he never cracked in his life. The man was a machine, but it's 1 in a million people who's like that. But about that horrible human being, Placido Domingo. But she talked about how he was singing Nessun Dorma, and she was watching him, and Placido Domingo never had a natural a reliable high B natural, which is the when Vincero, Vincero, it's that note up there. Because he's a dramatic tenor / baritone, so that area is always tricky for him. And so sometimes it comes out, sometimes it doesn't. And she said, what really brought things grounded for me is that I was watching him singing Nessun Dorma, and he went Vince, and it cracked, and he immediately stopped it. But you didn't notice anything because he maintained the poise. He basically kept the presence, and then when it was time to go down to the A, he went and the entire attitude that he had was, yes, I meant to do that, and the audience just went absolutely crazy. So, and she said, yeah,
sorry, just to clarify for someone who doesn't understand opera, he faked it until he made it.
He faked it until he made it. Well,
he faked it not making it. He faked making it when he didn't make it. And it's funny because Mary just did that on a recording recently. Sent me this record. Oh my God, I sucked at this show. And I'm listening to it. It's like, okay, I know how he sings this show, but he did the exact same thing. You did that. You did the Domingo cutoff.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah,
and
whatever.
So you knew what happened. It just sounded like style to everybody else.
Yes, it was a not to gross anyone out, but it was a gigantic glob of phlegm.
Yeah.
That decided to come up at that moment. And, as a singer, you can't control that.
But that was an example of you were going back and forth, right? You were driving like 3 hours to the venue.
Yeah, it was one of those things where logistics were illogistics.
Yes. It was not ideal circumstances, as Aquila would say in the military. It was what is it? Snafu and Fubar? Is that right, Aquila?
No. There are 3 states to anything. There's snafu, situation normal, all effed up.
Yep.
Tarfu, things are really effed up. And then there's fubar. Effed up beyond all
recognition. Yeah.
But the thing is, so she started telling me all of these stories, and she told me one story where one of Martille's famous roles was Norma, and she sings Casta Diva, and she said, well, there was one time where Casta Diva was not so diva, and I didn't hit the high note because she was in Mexico, and she had taken part of the local food, and it didn't sit very well with her for that night. And and she said, well, and the note just didn't come out. And so I said, Martille, what did you do? And she says, well, at that moment I said to myself, there was an emotional, psychological reason for Norma, not me, Norma, to not be able to sing that note. It was she was emotionally overcome, and I just went on with the role. And James Albritton, he studied with Virginia Ziani, very famous opera singer, and he told her, I used to watch Luciano Pavarotti all the time, and every single night when he was very young, he was in his 20s, very young, every single day he would sing Try for the High C, and he cracked. Every single day he cracked the high C, but he continued to do it. And then one day he no longer cracked. That is the day he became Luciano Pavarotti. And so it was kind of like, okay, so there is this because the opera world is a little bit psychotic, because nobody likes to admit that they're fallible human beings, that there is fallibility. But you can't get to a point where you're so much more reliable and you're solid if you don't fail a lot, because like I said, it's all about manipulating indirectly involuntary muscles
Mhm.
and involuntary parts. So, you can't flex it or close it like you do with your eyes. You have to kind of feel your way around, like, where is this part? Oh my God, where is this? So you're going to break, you're going to crack, you're going to sound like a drowning penguin at times.
Drowning penguin?
Yeah, because sometimes you'll go too far back and go, it's like, oh no. Okay,
Why does that sound like a drowning penguin? I'm imagining
As
a drowning penguin sounding like.
well, if
As a
if you
partner-
grew up
Sorry, what I will say is, as my partner is actually a zookeeper, I can say for a fact when a penguin panics in the water, it makes the most glorious.
See?
So wait, so Merryjest was right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I stand
There you go.
corrected. That's amazing. So good. All right, drowning penguin. Before I derailed, what was your point, Merryjest?
But here's the thing: the thing that the lesson that took me the hardest to learn, and which helped me grow some compassion for myself, is the fact that every time there is a mistake, and this is something that I would eventually kind of get reinforced when I started reading the Stoics, is that every step in the wrong direction or every mistake is this lesson. Now you know another way how not to do it. And it's not only useful to you, but it's also useful. For example, if I decided to teach voice, which I don't plan on doing because I don't have the patience, but if there ever came a young tenor who had issues and whose voice was so very hard to figure out for his teachers, I think I could be able to help them, because I know a myriad of ways to not sing correctly, and I can go, I know exactly what it is that you're doing, so let me try and help you with some of the ways that my teacher helped me get to a better spot. Because it's the Stoic notion of the obstacle is the way. That I like the idea of the fire that Marcus Aurelius uses, that it's like a fire that anything you throw at it makes it glow brighter. It's not, oh, I'm getting piled on by this, I'm going to get buried. No, I'm going to take this, I'm going to consume this, I'm going to use this to feed me, to make me thrive. I'm not going to let this defeat me, which is the opposite of you're no good, etc., etc. No, you're a fire. You can sparkle, you can feed yourself with what is being thrown at you, because the ultimate assumption is you are worth it.
All right, so there a bunch of people are chomping at the bit, so we're just going to go around. Aquila, you've wanted to say something for a while, so
I really feel what Merryjest has been saying, because I've been fighting with my voice.
right.
Now, this is not how I sound. This is my natural voice.
Right.
And trying to keep it up and bright and feminine is absolute murder. And in today's culture, this is the thing that I'm currently beating myself up about the most.
Okay.
Because where I live, it can literally be a matter of life and death.
Sure.
Or I should say, between a quiet day and a kinetic event in my case. But I'm really not liking that voice anymore. So yeah, I just faking it like you're making it, or what is it that you said, Merryjest?
It's more like I meant to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
With
were
the
told
accent.
in dance, it's you tango up and you tango on.
Yeah, I also did dance, so I know that feeling as well.
Because tango is a 4-track dance. It's the easiest one to screw up, because you don't step on your partner's toe. You need them in the short and curlies.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Instead, let's go to a break. The music's on. We'll continue with the Bubbleheads, the facilitators in the It's Not Therapy community, Jake, Moi, Aquila, and Merryjest, not beating ourselves up as much. If you want to see and hear more from the Bubbleheads, we're doing a workshop. Go to nottherapyshow.com to check it out. More on that later in the show. For now, stay tuned. Still Liana Kersner, still not a therapist, still talking with the Bubbleheads. And I cracked. Back in a bit. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. This is still a Bubbleheads chat talking about not beating ourselves up or beating ourselves up less with my It's Not Therapy community facilitators, Jake, Moi, Aquila, and Merryjest. Before the break, we were talking about, I meant to do that, pretending that everything's under control even when it's not. We're harder on ourselves than anyone else. I really think, to Merryjest's point, that we think people see what Moi was saying earlier. We think people see a lot more than they do, and we think people are judging us far more negatively than they are. And if they are judging that negatively, then we gotta talk, because I think those aren't your people, right?
Exactly. You have to find your people.
And Jake is nodding like crazy.
Yeah.
Jake, you've been very good, but you've been what do you got to say, man?
Well, it was one of those things. First of all, bouncing off Merryjest, and now what Aquila said as well in regards to certain things that we expect of ourselves that don't necessarily actually have to be the case. I'm not saying, Aquila, that you're not correct in any shape or form that you want to perform in a certain manner or have a certain type of voice. I got, only after I started working on phones did I find out I sound very similar to a phone, like automated phone thing. For example, hello, and thank you for calling Liana Cares. If you wish to speak to Liana directly, please press 1. And I didn't know I could do that until I started working in them. It's wild.
I'm sorry, as someone who works on customer service and does voicemails all day long, oh my God, that's gold. Thank you for sharing that out, Jay. No, I feel you, man.
But one of the things I actually wanted to point out was just simply, a lot of us are talking about how we've come to this point, and there are some people who might be listening, and this is me just being devil's advocate, where they might go, oh, well, it worked out for them, but my situation is different. That's always your first point of order in your head, going, but my position is unique. Trust me, I know. When I say I was 6 years old, I mean 6 years old, caring for a woman. And I saw other people getting really freaked out because they just got told if they pick their nose, a goblin's going to come out of their nose. And so that's as parents told their kids to stop them digging around and finding rubies, which was a way to say, stop nosebleeds. But this was such a unique experience for me because I didn't have anybody else. So anyone who's listening to us all here talking about how we have been, how we've already got past a lot of the problems that we're having. We all started off drowning in it. Because some people said, that it was gotten stuck in a spiral. This is the thing that you always hear is about a spiral. No, it's a spiral once you reach a certain point. In my experience, the very first step is you're drowning. It's just, you can't get up your head above water. The final time that you do, you find a person or a place or a situation where you can get your head above water. That's when the spiral starts to suck you back down. So what I'm going to say to people is that whenever you finally get something to make it work, do expect it to fail sometimes. And don't beat yourself up more. Yeah. And the final thing that I will just point out to everybody is Merryjest is my happy place right now. His singing just makes me so happy. So find things like that. Like I have these guinea pigs right beside me. You haven't heard a word from them because I keep stuffing them full of peppers and things just because I love watching them eat. Find little things. Yeah, find little things that don't even need to make you happy. Just something you can stare at. I love staring at my fire in the fireplace, and I could do it for hours, just like a psychopath, but it makes me feel better just looking at an open flame.
Yeah, Jake, finding your joy.
Mhm.
Like I always
Yeah,
say,
exactly.
like it's important. Okay, yeah, that's another important thing that it's important. I think everybody here has to make it clear like what's their joy, you know. And I think it's another thing like to give yourself the compassion. Like when somebody asks me like, okay, what's self-compassion? It was like, okay, well, what is like you yourself seeing yourself as a human being, but also how you get there is also by remember what is your joy, what is actually things that make you feel happy. That is also a human thing. We always think about like misfortune as human, but we don't think about joy as human.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that people who are, you were saying before, communicating with other people. And I really think that people that have profoundly negative self-talk tell on themselves when they go to talk to other people. And there's two places I could possibly go. Two paths are branching in a narrow wood right now. So, Mary, just say what you wanted to say, and maybe that'll make the decision for me.
Well, I just wanted to share something that helped me a lot.
Okay.
Accept fallibility, because it's something that we have to accept as human beings.
Yeah.
Yes.
So both as an artist and as a singer. So as a singer, I eventually started looking something called perle nere, black pearls. There's collections of those on YouTube, which is essentially recorded vocal failures of performers. So you can hear Nicolai Guerra, who is like one of the tenor gods ever, but in this particular night he was singing La Donna Immobile, and for the high B, well, I am not kidding, it was the most amazing crack I have ever heard in my life. And then and the audience still bravo, because he just kept it. And then like right after that was Jose Carrera singing Celestia Ida, and he went and I can't replicate it. It turned into a Tarzan yell. And it was
I love that so much.
And it was like, wow. But it wasn't the whole he got it wrong. It was like, for me, was these are people who are consummate professionals in their field, who have record contracts, who have sung at the Met, at Stuttgart, they sung everywhere. And yet here you have recordings where some people might say they basically crap the bed. And you go, if Nicolai Guerra or Martinelli or Pazero can have an off night like this, and they're already at the top, I am learning. I think I can afford myself a couple of rooster moments here and there, and be just all right. And and then you can look at artists you admire. You can go, Stepan Sajic or Frank Cho, and you go, they're amazing, but they weren't always Stepan Sajic and Frank Cho. Epictetus in his Enchiridion, he talks about, yes, a bull knows, an ox knows his strength, but the ox was not always an ox. Just like a person who is not always a noble person, and by noble he means strength of character, not they had to go through training. And sometimes you can go back and look at some of the early art, like I showed you, remember, Liana, that Batgirl commission from another artist?
Yeah.
And it looked like, so this is an artist who, I forget his name right now, but he was like really pulling in major work for a lot of companies. But this Batgirl commission, like, it looks like she had hip dysplasia. It looked like her crotch was like, it was the weirdest thing ever. And I go, wow, I mean, he's so good with anatomy right now, and this is like a Goetian nightmare right here of anatomy. And I'm going, I think I can afford myself to have a little compassion over the fact that I just screwed up a whole bunch of muscle groups in the back when I drew this picture. And I know what to watch out for the future, because, it was a learning point, and this artist was that learning point. And, I recommend to always look at that. Like, for example, I think Terry Pratchett is one of the greatest writers in the fantasy world. But if you look at his first book, The Color of Magic, it's nowhere
not
near
there yet. Yeah.
It's not there yet. But then when he hits his stride with Equal Rights and the Witches books and all that, I go, but you can see the growth. And it's but we have it in our mind. So many of us have it in our mind. We have we have our idols, we have our heroes, and we kind of have this notion that this is the way they've always been. They've always had this talent.
Yeah.
And it's just not true.
Yeah.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. Okay, I feel like saying I have spoken now. But yeah, I have those people. I mean, Alan Moore says, if you want to encourage yourself to write, read bad books.
Mm.
And
Oh my goodness. I
Yeah.
had the same feeling with like everything, Liana. Like bad movies, bad video games is like, oh,
Yeah.
this is so bad. It makes me encourage me to make something better.
Well, it also, what it does for me is it doesn't have to be the greatest thing ever. It just has to be good enough. And
Like
this
Howard
is
the Duck.
Well, this is where we get into the thorny question of good enough, because I tend to like things like Death Stranding. That the critics were rough on that game. I thought it was amazing, and I just think, well, they didn't get it. And I like to make things that not everybody's going to get, because I'm not a soprano. I can't do that. I can't be the princess. I'm not going to sing those parts.
Quick tangent there, because you mentioned the soprano, but here's the thing. Yeah. And we assume this,
he's so excited. Soprano.
The soprano. We assume the soprano is, always the one that's going to please everything. But even with Maria Callas, for example, who's considered by many to be the divine, you still had a whole bunch of people who went, no, Renata Scotto is better. Callas is not good enough.
Well,
and then you had, people who go, no, Renata Scotto is not good enough. Callas is better. But then you go, no, they're both great, dude. Stop.
Well, and that's, I mean, every person you just mentioned about, the mistakes or the flails and there's always somebody who's not going to like you. I think that sometimes people just want to pull someone down. And that is what I remind myself because it gets rough, right? It's because sometimes it's like, yeah, they hit those things. And, every time I feel like I need to be specific about something that gets me. But then it's like, okay, Liana, you're saying this in public. People are going to use it against you. And then it's like, yeah, whatever. Kratos got stabbed. He stabbed himself with his own sword at the end of God of War 3 to defeat Athena. So here we gonna go. God of War 3 ending, right? I have always been exceptionally self-conscious about being annoying or obnoxious or not properly feminine. Right.
I would just want to say something about that.
Yeah.
For everybody who thinks they're annoying and obnoxious, listen, you probably are to somebody. You probably are to somebody.
Everybody is. And that's
everybody is.
Right.
So
but those ones hit me harder. And I know that's me. It's not some cultures throw that at people more than others. I am very aware, because of my career in media, that a guy could go into a meeting and do things that if I did would be considered obnoxious, too aggressive, and completely unprofessional. And there was absolutely nothing I could do about that. So that one bugs me. But then I see people dogging on Tom Holland, and it's like, all right, it ain't me. I that gives me permission to ignore and not internalize that external beady uppy stick, right? Because how can anyone hate Spider-Man, right? That's what I tell myself. And that music tells me that we need to go to our final break. Stay tuned. Moi, Jake, Aquila, Merryjest, the Bubbleheads. If you want to join us in workshops where we work on not beating ourselves up and a whole bunch of other things, go to nottherapyshow.com. All the ticketing information is there, and you can join our mailing list to keep abreast of all the news that's coming up. When we come back, final thoughts. Stay tuned. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on the final segment of this It's Not Therapy. I am Liana Kersner, and I'm here with the Bubbleheads, MoiMoi, Jake, Aquila, and Merryjest, and we're talking copes. Copes to not beat ourselves up or beat ourselves up less. If you want more, if we've wet your whistle and you want more, go to nottherapyshow.com. Join our mailing list, and ticketing information for our workshops is there. Now, Aquila, you had a cope.
One of the copes that I have is telling myself everyone starts somewhere. And I really, with my photography, believe it or not, I actually still beat myself up pretty good because there's so much to learn, there's so much technique, and when I started out, I had a lot of photographer friends, and some of whom had been professionals and doing it for multiple decades. And I started comparing myself to them because I wanted to be like them, photographically speaking. And that was absolutely the worst idea because I was trying to emulate something that wasn't going to work for me regardless.
Right.
Because, much like singing or drawing, there's a voice, there's a technique, there's a style that you have to find for yourself. And I didn't realize that until someone exposed me to, I think it's pronounced chiaroscuro.
Yeah. Light and dark.
Yeah. And I'm not a glamour photographer. I don't do the super flat, glamour lighting with ultra polished skins. I'm like, no, people are human. But I had to start somewhere, and starting in a bad place where you're already having negative feelings about what you're doing, how you're progressing, can really hamper you.
Oh, that's so true. Coming at it from the model end of the photography process, you got to put that out of your mind. When I was modeling, when I was doing pinup modeling, I would think the most savage, awful things about all the men in the room just to get in the headspace. It's like, I am going to devour you with the fire of my nipples. Like, that's where I would start.
I love that.
That is so quotable.
But that was what I had to do because I was so self-conscious. I was so nervous because, like, oh my God, people are seeing everything. Because the thing about pinup modeling is, you take 100 photos that are garbage, a couple dozen that are just okay, for 4 that are amazing.
Oh yeah. And even on my best days on a shoot with an amazing model, I might get it's like a truly momentous day is maybe a 40% keep rate. I saw that, Jake.
Oh, that's high. That's really Jake was doing his best pinup pose.
All I was wanting to say was going back to the whole Tom Holland thing beforehand.
Yes.
Because I wanted to I looked it up very quickly while we were talking. That his infamous spoiler, where he was on Instagram and showed the poster for Infinity War. That film made $2 billion. It cost $300 million to make. If you ever thought you fucked up, just remember that. How his apple must have made diamonds at that moment in time. And then remember, he still went on to do further films. If he survived at 20 odd with just having a babysitter every so often, you'll be fine.
So my husband shared something with me about his brother used to work in Hollywood in post-processing. He did stuff for Californication and several other stuff. And at one point there was, because this is something that happens quite a bit on television, they might get, the post-production team gets footage that might not be exactly the best, and they're kind of expected to make the effects look good, but sometimes the takes are just not going to work. And so there was this one poor production guy who was just like losing sleep and working really hard to try to get this, which was pretty much kind of a crapshoot crap shot work, and he was just not getting it, and he was like running himself down to the wire. And then he was told by his boss, look, it's just a TV show.
Mhm.
Just do what you can. It's just a TV show. And that goes back to something that Marcus Aurelius used to say. Like, when you're beating yourself up, when you're overwhelmed or you're intimidated, or strip the legend away from something.
Mhm.
For example, if you're invited to a banquet and you're intimidated at sitting at this banquet with all these great lords dressed in silk, just say to yourself, for example, I am eating the carcass of an ox with some boiled vegetables, surrounded by people who are wearing things that come out of a worm's butt. Or
that's a great breakdown of it. Yeah.
Or I am, or for anything that you're doing. Like, for example, if I were beating myself up because I'm going to, like, say, let's say that tomorrow I get the chance to sing at the Met and I am not in good voice, the way I would prepare myself for, I'm going to be standing on stage wearing some silly costumes that are probably not historically accurate, and I'm going to be producing some very high sounds. I'm going to be yelling over an orchestra for a bunch of people who paid to come see something that they might not entirely know what it is. A good chunk of them are there just to be seen and don't care about what I sound like. Those who do care about the singing know enough about singers to know that sometimes the voice just ain't there. And in the great scope of things, this is just me going on stage to play pretend while the orchestra makes noises and I do loud noises. And at the end of the day, my life is not over.
Yeah. Reminds me of that show we did where I had no voice.
Yes, exactly. If it's what Marcus Aurelius says is, if this is humanly possible, you can do it, and if it's humanly endurable, you can endure it. You can ask yourself, will this kill me? If not, you can endure it. And if somehow it will kill you, like you're trying to defuse a bomb, well, once it happens, it will end with you. You won't have to worry about that after. But 99% of the times, unless you're a bomb diffuser or whatever, you're going to be fine.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we all have had moments where it's like, oh my God, we're going to die. But that's a story for another time. I want to bring this in for a landing because we're out of time again. Great show again. Thank you, the Bubbleheads, Jake, Merryjest, Aquila, and MoiMoi. Tune in next week. We're going to talk about thought stopping, why it doesn't work, and why it can actually make you beat yourself up more. Until then, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, check out nottherapyshow.com, sign up for our mailing list, and check out our workshops. Have yourself a great week, and remember, your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. See you next time.